iCoachKids.
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 Déanam postí a iluant. iCoachKids.
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 iCoachKids. Do you?
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're well and I hope you're healthy and hanging in there. My name is Gary Hodgson and I'm delighted to be your first host for today on day one of the 4th International iCoachKids Conference. Over the course of the next few days, we're welcoming over 20 speakers from around the world in discussing two important topics in coaching: preventing dropout and talent development. We're thrilled to be hosting this event along with world-leading coaching practitioners and researchers that will be sharing their insights. We're welcoming audience members from 88 different countries this week, which is incredible, reflecting the reach of this global movement. For those new to iCoachKids, we're a not-for-profit global organisation and coaching movement that was initiated in 2016. The success of the initial European project has been unprecedented and attracted attention and interest from non-EU nations, international sports federations, and global players in health and industry. Our mission is to champion child-centered sport by promoting good policy and practice. For those familiar with iCoachKids, you'll notice we have a new look today, and today marks the launch of our brand new iCoachKids branding, which you'll see all around us today and including on the previous video you've just seen. So be sure to look out for our new logo as we move forwards. Please also follow us via our social media channels, which are typically @/iCoachKidsWorld via Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And make sure that you like, share, and retweet to grow the global movement. And as you stay with us today, please post using the hashtag iCoachKids to continue the conversation. Finally, stay tuned to our social media to find out more about our brand new website, which will be launching in early 2021. You definitely won't want to miss it. Let's move on to today's conference proceedings. So today's topic is preventing dropout. In a year that has dealt us many different challenges in keeping youth sport up and running, it's never been more important to consider how we keep children and young people active in a safe development sport set of experiences. Our presenters today will offer expert insights from research and practical perspectives, while also welcoming questions for you, our audience. Please post any questions that you have via the Q&A function, not the chat function, the Q&A function, which is exclusive to this Zoom webinar process. At the end of each presentation, we'll aim to ask as many of these as we can to our panelists via our chairs. If you're watching live on YouTube, please post your questions in the comments area for us to collect. In the event of any technical difficulties, which we are all aware of on Zoom, given how 2020 has gone so far, please reuse the link that you have been provided and we will get back up and running as soon as possible. I will now pass you on to Dr. Sergio Lara-Bercial, co-founder of iCoachKids, who will introduce the Future of Youth Sport panel. Over to you, Sergio.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sergio Lara-Bercial, co-founder of the iCoachKids global movement, and I'm based at Leeds Beckett University in the UK. We are going to kick things off by talking about the power of good coaching. Whether it's coaching at the professional or the grassroots level, or advocating in the public and private sectors, good coaching is something that all of our panelists believe in. Coaches can make all the difference in a kid's experience with play and sport. This is especially true for kids who face more barriers to participate: girls, kids from underserved communities, and kids of all abilities. We also know that kids are more likely to love playing and keep playing when they connect with their coaches. And now, especially in the current times, adults need tools to motivate, empower, and inspire kids to reach their full potential. And that's why we are absolutely delighted to welcome Nike to the iCoachKids family and to announce a partnership that will allow our message and movement to reach new heights. Together, we are developing a suite of coaching essentials. Let me see if I can show you those. There you are. A suite of coaching essentials, 5 online modules that we are designed to help more people, especially those who have never coached before, become great volunteer youth coaches. Our 5 coaching essentials modules will help coaches create a fun, inclusive, and safe environment for all kids, regardless of gender, background, or ability. Principles that I know our guests believe in and want to discuss. So without further ado, let's introduce the panel. Jill Ellis was the coach of the United States Women's National Soccer Team from 2014 to October 2019. In that period, she won 2 FIFA Women's World Cups in 2015 and 2019, making her the only the second coach in history to win consecutive World Cups. Jill currently serves as an ambassador for US Soccer and is working with the Federation to raise the number of female coaches in the US at all levels of the game. Our next panelist is Houda Loukili. He's a grassroots coach and a former Dutch youth kickboxing champion whose career was cut short due to an accident. However, turning that setback into a strength, Houda now works as a professional consultant and public speaker, leveraging her social pedagogical background and time in the ring to inspire her audiences. Next, John Bales. John Bales is the president of the International Council for Coaching Excellence, the world's largest community of coaching organizations. He is a leading expert in coach education and development, global sport and coaching systems, and sport organization management. And finally, last but not least, Caitlin Morris is the general manager of social and community impact at Nike. Made to Play is Nike's commitment to getting kids moving through play and sport. Caitlin leads the Made to Play global portfolio, which emphasizes coaching as well as increasing the participation of girls and kids from underserved. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. How's everybody? Give us a wave. Very good. Listen, let's crack on. The first question that I have for you today, it's a pretty open question to all of you, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do is if you can share with us the first time you witnessed the power of good coaching, whether that was as a player, as a coach, or as a parent. What was your takeaway? Who'd like to go first? Give us a nod.
I'll go.
There you go, Caitlin. You go first.
So, even though I spend all of my professional days thinking about how to create early positive experiences for kids in sport, my first real observation is very personal as a parent. My son Nathan, around the age of 6, announced he was terrible at basketball. So you can imagine it was a little bit of a battle to get him to participate in the youth league at 8. But with some friendly peer pressure, he showed up. I was worried. And then I met his coach, Coach Brooks, and I wasn't worried anymore because Coach Brooks really knew what a good coach needed to do. And a good coach needs to see every child, celebrate their contribution, and encourage teammates to do the same. So while Nathan had already decided he wasn't going to shoot a basket for the benefit of the team, his coach celebrated his defense. And of course, when they did the sort of the compliment circle at the end of each game, his more assertive teammates celebrated how well he passed, and he felt great. And it's testament to that coach that he stayed in that league for 3 years. I should sort of then quickly say, since now he has found his sport, he's a fencer, that a great coach knows you have to make parents part of the extended team. Because as the saying goes, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think that great coaches not only focus on keeping the kid at the center, but making sure that the parents do too.
Fantastic, Caitlin. I'm going to take one thing you said there, celebrating every child. How important is that? It's fantastic. Okay, so who's going to share next an experience of the power of good coaching?
I mean, I can. Hi there, everybody.
Go ahead, Jill.
All right. First of all, hello to the global audience. It's so great to be a part of this, and thank you for involving me. So I was probably the person who influenced me the most, even in my choice of a career, was my father. He was my first coach, and I wasn't able to play sort of organized football or soccer in England. But when we came to America, my father started an academy. And so every day during the summer, 10 weeks of summer, I would go out, and I would like to say my father is a masterful teacher. It didn't matter if he was working with 6-year-olds or 20-year-olds. You could see that they were fully engaged. I think the capacity for someone to engage them in their learning process, it helps make a great coach. And my father would he would just be relatable, and he would involve them, and every gain he would celebrate every step that these children or these players took in their journey, and get really excited. He was very animated. And I think the other thing my father, his mantra for his academy that he started was winning is to learn. And so he just philosophically embraced that it wasn't about the trophy, it wasn't about the medal. It was really about this development, about this growth, about getting one day better. And I think children found that contagious. And I always say the mark of a good coach is if your player wants to come back to training the next day. And my dad's players would flock back and be excited to take one step further in their development.
Wow, so much to go through there, Jill. Fantastic contribution there around. I love a masterful teacher. Okay, someone that can really engage people in the learning process. Winning is to learn. Making sure they come back. I mean, that's so important. And hopefully over the course of today's conference, we're going to touch on so many of those things. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Houda next. Houda, give us a bit of your experience of great coaching. What did great coaching look like for you?
Yeah, of course, my mother is also a good coach, but I want to talk about kickboxing today. When I was 11 years old, I started kickboxing, and I was facing some personal challenges as a teenage girl. And my coach was the person who was always there for me, encouraging me every step of the way. And his positive way of coaching and the personal attention that I received during my training helped me to bring out my confidence and strength in every aspect of my life, and overcome many challenges in and outside the boxing ring. So looking back, he was such a strong role model in my life, someone to encourage, support, and inspire me to be the best version of myself. And he was also the person who showed me the power of positive coaching, and actually inspired me to choose this path for myself and do the same for others.
And Houda, you've touched on a couple of things there that are really close to my heart. The idea of the coach being influential, not only in the ring, but outside of the ring, really being someone that can support you through your journey through life. And in your case, really when you were a teenager and the challenges that you faced at the time. So that is so powerful. And again, I'm sure we're going to get onto that later on today. And I love the idea of positive coaching that I was actually listening to a podcast around positive psychology this morning, of all things. And when you said that, just really made me smile, because it's so important that we keep a positive outlook all the time. Thanks, Houda. I'm going to move over to John. John, give us your first experience or something that really you can remember around the power of good coaching.
Yeah, so first, thanks, Sergio, but what an incredible network we have with us today. This is really outstanding. At a personal level, my first coach as an 11-year-old in canoe kayak was Herky Jordan. He loved the sport. He loved working with young children. He was patient, fun to be around, and we all just developed such a dedication to him and to the sport, and developed that love of sport that I think really can grow at that age. So he was an excellent teacher, and I think that's such an important element of being a good coach with children. And he's a tremendous influence through my whole life. I still look back to those days.
And that's amazing, really, that when the coach is someone that actually loves the sport and communicates that love, that's when we get people to work very hard and fall in love with the sport. Really, someone said to me a while back that you can't really force people into excellence. You have to love them into excellence, and that's a great example, John. So again, so we've touched on a really big number of things in these first quick answers. So I'm gonna go now one by one, and I'm gonna ask you some further questions individually to keep building this picture of what youth sport really can do, and what the future may look like for youth sport. So Jill, I'm gonna come to you really, and perhaps building on what you were saying about your dad. And again, sorry, before you go, I was really happy to see that there was a positive relationship between your dad and yourself, even if he was your coach, because that's something that for a lot of parents, it's a difficult thing, because they end up having to coach their teams, and it makes things hard because you're coaching your own kid, and it's a difficult situation. So that it was nice to hear that your dad was able to manage that situation really well, which I sometimes don't do very well with my own children. Okay, but anyway, what did you think is what do you believe is the ultimate role of a coach? You know, what do coaches really do?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I've been asked this question many times, and I kind of summarized it by saying I think coaches are caretakers of dreams. You know, it's this idea that we are, you know, it's a service industry, right? In terms of we're trying to give, and ultimately what you're trying to do as a coach is you're trying to take someone's hopes and dreams and goals and bring them to fruition in some capacity, you know, in some meaningful way, try and assist this young person on their journey, on their pursuit of whatever their goal might be. So that's kind of how I sort of summarize it in terms of a role of a coach. But, you know, I think in terms of what we do, I think it comes down to three things for me. It's about caring, it's about teaching, and it's about inspiring. I think those are the three sort of cornerstones for me as a coach. You know, I think first and foremost, you know, especially when you're working with young players in their formative years, it is about connecting with them. And it's about feeding their passion. I think when you're working with young people, it's not probably the overcoaching of the X's and O's and the tactics and the technique. It's about wanting them to love the game and fall in love with the game. So I think, you know, ultimately, as a coach, you have to know and understand who your audience is and care about them as a person. You know, when I was working with the senior players last summer, to know them outside of just being athletes, to show that they were people that you wanted to work with, you knew them more than just as soccer players, you knew them as people. I think that's very important in terms of the whole picture of a coach. You know, I think the teaching element, as players start to get older and they start to sort of matriculate into maybe a specific sport, then certainly I think that you owe it to these young people to arm them with the skills and the tools to help them be successful, or at least help them grow and develop. So I think then at that point, it's making sure that you are a good teacher of the technique. And when I mean technique at the appropriate time. It's making sure, you know, sometimes I've gone out to fields and I've watched little 7 and 8 year olds, and the coach is trying to teach them a really specific, intricate set piece, and you're kind of like, it's got to be age appropriate. And so I think the teaching part is, again, it's knowing your audience, it's understanding, you know, what is going to resonate with them, what do they need. And certainly for the younger players, it is this idea of making sure that they are fundamentally sound in their base techniques, but all the while having fun. I think that's the art of being a coach. And then the inspiration piece as a coach, you know, I think one of the things that's great about sport is it's not easy, and there's challenges and there's pitfalls and there's highs and there's lows. But I think one of the things that's important as a coach is that you help people understand where those highs and lows fall into their development, meaning, you know, even with struggle and hardship, you can inspire as a coach to make sure that they understand that that is a part of their learning process. So I think as a coach, inspiring, you know, with the senior women's national team, it wasn't about going out and being rah-rah. It was making sure that they felt comfortable and confident, that they had the skills, that they had each other's backs, and they were prepared for this moment. And that was one of the things that, you know, I would share with them, and I would share with young players. You're built for this, you're made for this, and go out there and enjoy it. Even if it's as big as a World Cup final or your first little soccer game, it really is about living in the joy of the moment of playing sport.
You said something there that is absolutely beautiful. One of the most beautiful phrases I've heard for a long time, this idea of being a caretaker of dreams. It gave me goosebumps when you were saying it, really, because actually we normally, a lot of the times we talk about coaches sometimes not being recognized, and particularly volunteer coaches don't get enough recognition for the work they do. But even if we can ourselves just think of ourselves as caretakers of dreams, that's a great recognition, even if we can do that just by ourselves. And I love the other point you made about the fact that things have to be age appropriate. Because a lot of the times where we go wrong is when we're trying to feed these 7-year-olds something that is just not they're not ready for that. If I may ask you just another quick question there. You talk about inspiration a lot, and I have to come clean with you here, okay? Because I think I've watched your Netflix documentary 3 times in the last. But talk a bit more about this idea of inspiring people, even particularly when things are a bit rough, really, when things are not going well.
Yes, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's acknowledging that, just like life, sport reflects that in terms of the hard pieces are actually what make the good pieces happen. And so I think the tough moments, it's not letting those moments sort of cripple you or paralyze you. It's understanding that those moments are necessary for this continued growth. I mean, I think ultimately all of us probably on this call today understand that it's the moments that have stretched us and challenged us and stressed us. Those are the moments that have actually been probably the biggest moments of growth. And I think that's important to remind young people that, I tell them that Abby Wambach, who's one of our most iconic players ever, she got cut from every youth national team, that Megan Rapinoe has had 3 torn ACLs, that nobody lands on top of the mountain, that it is a climb, it is a journey. So I think when I talk about, people finding their passion and finding their inspiration, it really is about, what lights them up, what gets them out of bed every morning. And it's finding that. One of the things I say to parents, they're like, oh, how can I help my kid? And especially kids that are playing a lot of different sports. And the parents say, should they specialize? And I said, no, just feed their passion, whatever that might be right now, just feed their passion and support them. And to your point earlier, it's not to coach them, it is to support them and encourage them. Because the sport itself, life itself, will deal us enough challenges and enough setbacks and moments of growth that parents should be there alongside, just being supportive.
And that's interesting, really, because one of our jobs, really, either as a coach or as a parent, and I think there are lots of similarities between being a coach and being a parent, is that we have to let them fall, and we just have to be there to help them, to support them getting back up, really. And obviously, I think back to your point about being age appropriate, the size of the fall have to be considerate of the age of the child, okay? Because we don't want to really throw people in the deep end like that, but we don't want to be too overprotective, really, or do everything for them. Fantastic, Jill. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna move to Houda. Houda, you really, your face really lit up and you smiled when you were reflecting on the impact of your coach when you were younger. So explain a bit more, what was it that he did to be able to put your needs first, to really be so centered, so centered on what you needed to do, really? What did your coach do to be so focused on helping Houda?
Yeah. As I mentioned, I was going through a rough time back then, and I think one of the things I appreciated most was that my coach never pretended or ignored my personal circumstances. So he was also the one who really helped make me comfortable with my choice of wearing a hijab during practice. This was a huge issue for me, and I often felt embarrassed talking about it when I was so young with people because I was the only one wearing the hijab in the gym. And it was also very difficult to keep it in one place. And I always had to fix it with elastics and tape. And at one point, I was even worried I will have to give up to not play sport anymore. And another example of my coach is when we were struggling to pay contribution and there were no grants available, he still let us play. And that was so important for me and for my siblings. And my coach, however, was so understanding and supportive and helping me through all these difficult moments, and always encouraged me to push through and not give up. And it was so important for me. And he, how can I say that? He really showed me the power and difference that personal attention can have on a kid's experience and perception of sport. That's why I think it's so important that children, and especially those from other backgrounds, from unserved communities or difficult backgrounds, get a chance to have a positive role model in their life. In my case, I want to help girls in the same way, because I strongly believe that if you can see it, you can be it.
So talk a little bit more about your role now. How are you using everything you learned from your coach and also from your personal experience and circumstances as a young girl trying to do sport? How are you using that now in your day-to-day to help others?
It's for me so important to create a safe place for the girls, where they have respect from me and from the other girls and other coaches. I have chosen to give extra attention to focus more on the girls, because I've experienced that they need a different approach. Compliments are not always giving, and that is something I want to do. And maybe, do you want to talk more about this, or I can do it for an hour?
I do want to talk more about this, really, because it's really interesting. And
Okay.
I was really keen. You said something that you said that again gave me goosebumps, was my coach never ignored my personal issues. And I think that's great, because a lot of the times I think that as coaches we feel that our job is to teach people the sport, but I have this little catchphrase that I use all the time with my students, where we say we have to build relationships before we build skills. Okay, and it seems that that's what your coach did, that he was constantly focused on building the relationship with you, that to support you as a person. Really, is that the case, that your coach saw you as a person before seeing you as an athlete?
Yes, that's right. I can give you example. I can give that the girls I coach at the Islamic primary school this year can choose to sport with their hijab, okay? And maybe not all the coaches say, okay, it's okay to sport with your hijab. And they have, and I had certain conditions that I happy to meet. So my condition was also to wear a long trouser. And if the girl wants to play gymnastic with long trouser, it's for me okay. And when what I do, what I have learned from my own coach is when I go with them to other sport clubs, I make sure that there is a female coach, because for the parents of these girls, it's very important. And I also make sure that I'm accessible. So when parents want to talk with me via WhatsApp or something like that, that's possible. So you make it easy. You make it easy to get them involved with sports, and that's what I learned from my coach, because he did that with me, and now I can do that with the girls who I'm coaching.
Brilliant, Houda. So really about keeping the person at the forefront, really. Thanks, Houda. I'm going to move over to Caitlin, really. And Caitlin, I need you to really tell me, why is coaching important to Nike? What's it got to do with Nike?
It's got everything to do with Nike, Sergio. At Nike, our mission statement is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And we're probably one of the few companies where we have a corollary on our mission statement, which is there's an asterisk that says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. The problem is fewer and fewer children today believe that. whether you're my son at 6 announcing that you're no good at basketball, or most 8 to 10-year-olds are deciding at that point whether or not they think of themselves as athletes. And having that positive relationship with a coach is a game changer. It will make or break whether or not they decide to stay in sport. So sport isn't going to thrive if we don't have coaches out there making it thrive with kids. And so, I've heard so much from Houda, who's been such a wonderful partner to Nike already, around sort of the importance of having a relatable role model. And for us, that training is almost sort of, it's the beginning and the middle and the end of the whole experience. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when you care, that's great, but caring is only the first step. You need strategies. You need strategies to be able to make sport fun for kids of all abilities. How do you get the kid who's best on the court to also have fun, as much fun as the kid who's just learning how to play? You need strategies to organize yourself when you've got 20 kids you've never met before. How are you going to form those relationships if you don't have some sort of roadmap to get you there? And we've actually had a lot of experience in our commitment to training and developing coaches through our own employees. So Nike Community Ambassadors, we lead from the center here. Nike Community Ambassadors are retail employees who go out and volunteer in their own communities to coach. But much as people assume that because they're Nike, they're sport. And one of the great experiences we had was a young group of retail employees going to a PE class in Seattle. And the PE teacher saying, great, you're here, bye. And they're there, and they've got 20 kids or 30 kids, they have no idea what they're doing. And that was before we created Nike Community Ambassador Program, where we train all of these ambassadors to go out on the basics of emotional connection, adjusting games for all abilities. And we now have more than 5,500 coaches around the world doing exactly that. And because they're from the communities, they are often reflecting the kids they're serving. So whether that's from the diversity lens or from a girls lens, we know that around the world, far fewer coaches are women. We need more Jill Ellis's in the world. But all girls need a chance to have a relatable role model. And so we've also sort of worked on not just the training piece directly, but also how do we build tools for the field. So one of the things we did is we worked with experts and community program partners around the world to create the Coaching Girls Guide as an example of, hey, our job is to partner with others. Team impact is a team sport. And how do we sort of fill gaps in the field with things that we think are necessary? It's also why we're so excited to partner with iCoachKids, who clearly have a leadership place in this space. But what can we do together so that coaches don't just feel trained, but they also feel like they have a community, that peer support. It's hard to be great on your own. And how do you have that network of peers who can help you and encourage you in your own journey?
And it's amazing, really, because you mentioned caring is not enough, really. You have to have some strategies. And I think that's where we come together really nicely, okay? Because we have some of those strategies. And like you say, with your own development programs, that's the space that we're in as well, where we want to make sure that, we've got 2,000 people with us today, right? And they all care, and they all have some strategies, and we just want to add to that, if you want, that arsenal of strategies really for everybody. So that's a fantastic addition to our family, obviously. And you made me laugh as well, because when you said you got thrown in there with 20 kids, and I remember those days, when I started coaching 20 odd years ago, and the first time I went into a primary school, and they just threw me in there with 30 kids in the middle of Manchester in the UK, and with my Spanish accent, and I was terrified, okay? And I wish I had some of those strategies already in my bag, which I didn't at the time. So hopefully that's what we can do. Thanks, Caitlin. I'm gonna move over to John now, and John, the question for you is a bit complex, really, but what is the current picture? What do we know about the volunteer youth coaching workforce today?
Yeah, so there is some excellent research out there now. So we are learning more and more about really what the current reality is for youth coaching throughout Europe and around the world. First of all, an interesting fact is that coaching is the largest workforce in Europe, that there's over 9 million people coaching within the EU, which makes it the largest workforce, bigger than teaching or doctors. So it is a very big workforce, but it's also primarily a volunteer workforce. So the vast majority of coaches within Europe are volunteer, and most, about half, come from states that don't have any regulations or requirements. So it's very open entry, but not a regulated profession at this point in time. There's some excellent coach education programs out there, but again, they don't differentiate, and there's been several comments around this, that they don't really differentiate about across the different contexts. And as we know, and as comments have been made, that coaching high performance athletes can be very different from coaching children. And so I think that's one of the real reasons why I Coach Kids is such an important initiative, to really provide more of those tools and ideas specific to coaching children. And one other thing we know is that women are underrepresented in coaching. They're very underrepresented at the high performance level. Only 11% of Olympic coaches are women, even though almost 50% of the athlete pool at an Olympics is women. But even at the developmental level, women are underrepresented, and it varies across countries and certainly across sports, but about 30% of coaches are women at the developmental levels. So again, there's a lot of work to be done there to make the environment inviting and supportive to encourage more women to coach.
Thanks, John. It is really it's fascinating when you look at the fact that it is really the largest workforce, and it is completely unregulated, if you want, in many countries. It really puts it into perspective, really. And we're going to start bringing the panel to a close. We've got 3 minutes left, and I wanted to again have a final question to all of you. We've got nearly 750 people with us right now, plus the people on YouTube and everybody that's going to be watching this on the YouTube channel over the next few days. If you could ask everyone in the audience to do one thing to help improve a child's sport experience, what would that be? And I'm going to start with Caitlin. Okay, Caitlin, what would be your one thing that you would want people to do?
I think the one thing I would focus on is making sure that you're creating an inclusive space. There is no reason why any child shouldn't be able to participate. And so when you see one sitting on the sidelines, ask yourself why, and what can you do to bring them in? Whether that is making them feel welcome, whether they wear the hijab or not, whether it is changing the game so that different abilities feel like they're still competing at a level that's interesting for them, but just make it inclusive.
Thanks, Caitlin. So inclusivity, Houda, what would it be for you? What would be the one thing for you?
We cannot forget the importance of parents in coaching. Parents are more involved than they used to be sometimes. That's a good thing, but it's also a skill to manage their expectations. As a mother, I also find it important to know how my child is doing at the sports club, and therefore also give this opportunity to the other parents. Parents need to see you as a role model. They want to identify with you. You need to have respect for their culture and respect their needs. So, yeah, I think that's very important to don't forget it, to involve the parents also, because the kids can say, "Okay, mom, I'm going to the sports club." No, mom or dad, are very important.
Thanks. So we've got inclusivity and parents, and we've got a minute to go. So, John, you got 30 seconds. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really making it fun, making sure that the kids want to come back for the next practice, for the next season. And what does it mean to make it fun? I think it's about social interaction, being with their friends, and about getting better, about improving their skills. So those are important aspects for the coach.
Thanks, John. So making it fun. Jill, wrap it up.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think as a coach, it's important to sometimes remember why you fell in love with sport. And so think about that when you go to your audience, who are your young players. Remember what brought you to the game. Remember what you love about the game and make sure those things. I think sometimes, especially in this country, we see coaches over-coaching. It's do this, step here, play here. And so sometimes we have to remember that element of free play and allowing the players to make decisions and not over coaching them in that environment. Sure, technique's fine, safety's important, but also remember why you got and fell in love with the game.
Thank you. Well, all four of you, we are on time or thereabouts, a minute out. Okay, great job. Thank you for joining us today. John and Caitlin for your work driving more people into coaching. Jill and Houda for your work on and off the field and for being incredible role models for all coaches, but especially for female coaches. Have a great rest of the conference, and what a way to kick us off. Thank you so much, and back to Gary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Exactly right there, Sergio. What a way to kick off the conference, and make sure, everybody, that you continue the conversation live on social media. Make sure that you tweet using the hashtag iCoachKids, and let's get trending today. We've got lots of people joining the global movement. So thank you for Sergio there and the Future of Youth Sport panel, Caitlin, Jill, Houda and John. I'd now like to welcome one of iCoachKids' founding members, Sheila Quinn, who will chair our next session. Sheila?
Hi, good evening, everyone, or should I say good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are in the world. And thank you so much, Gary, for the opportunity to introduce the next session. Our next session is going to provide an overview of the new iCoachKids Plus program, which we've recently embarked on. The session will offer the preliminary findings of a large research study on dropout in youth sports trends across the EU. To do that, we have Dr. Stacey Emmonds and Dr. Sergio Lara-Bercial from Leeds Beckett University, who lead this study. Both Stacey and Sergio are practicing youth sport coaches, as well as having conducted multiple studies, multiple research studies in this area. So would you please welcome Stacey and Sergio? Thank you.
Thanks a million, Sheila. Thank you so much. It's me again. Listen, thank you for the introduction, and obviously thank you for all the work you've done over the last few years to make iCoachKids what it is. So great to have you with us today, Sheila. Let me really start by explaining what iCoachKids Plus is. So it is really a follow-up to the original iCoachKids project that we started over 4 years ago now. And at the time, we really focused on 5 to 12-year-olds. It was a project co-funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. And what we wanted to do is to extend the project from that 5 to 12-year-old focus to 13 to 18-year-olds. Because at that point, there's a lot of things happening really with young people in sport. And we wanted to focus on 2 of those things. And the first one was the idea of preventing dropout in youth sport. We know that in that period between 13 and 18 years of age, that's when a lot of the dropout tends to happen. And we also know that at that point, by contrast to dropout, a lot of children actually go into what we call talent development environments, okay? And they start spending in excess of 10, 15, or even 20 hours doing their sport every day. So we wanted to really look at those 2 issues over a period of 3 years with this new project. So what are we gonna do in the 3 years? We're going to do 2 main things. We're going to do some research into dropout. We want to understand the trends, the current trends across a lot of European countries and a lot of sports. How is dropout? And we also wanted to understand why children drop out. So that's the dropout part of the project. In terms of talent development, we want to understand the perceptions of coaches, parents and players of the talent development environments they are involved in. No one has ever looked at what those three groups of the stakeholders, really, of people think about in terms of the, how holistic, how conducive to personal development are these environments. And on the back of that, we would like to develop some guidelines to help clubs and federations to set up really holistic environments. And once we've done those two pieces of research, with what we learn, we're going to create 2 new free e-learning courses, one on preventing dropout and one on creating holistic talent development environments. At which point I'm going to hand over to my colleague Stacey, who has been leading on the dropout research, so she can tell us what we found out.
Thanks, Sergio. So just to build initially on what Sergio started with there, where we're at the moment is we're exploring dropout trends across the EU. It's widely known that we do see an increase in dropout in adolescents, so starting to particularly progress into sort of the 13 to 18 age category. But we're not really clear on why those trends are necessarily occurring. So that's where we're at with the research at the moment, is starting to explore that. We know the importance of keeping adolescents involved in sport, both from physical and mental health perspective. So where we're at in terms of the literature, obviously initially doing a search of the literature before getting into our own research, there has been systematic reviews done in the area, collating dropout trends across different countries across the world. But what we don't really have at the moment is an up-to-date understanding of the landscape across Europe. So that's been our first aim and our first goal with what we've been doing so far. So our research aims and sort of questions is to look at participation rates of children and young people and how these vary across different ages and stages of development, and across different countries and across different genders. The way we've initially started doing that is to look at pre-existing data. So what we've done and is start to collect data across a range of countries, which is highlighted by the pins on the map. And we have to sort of really send thanks to all the iCoachKids partners who've really helped us massively to get this data and share the data and reach out to as many sports and countries as possible, which as I'll move on to shortly, has allowed us to generate a very large sample of data, which is some of the largest data sets currently out there within the literature and within research. So we've collected data from a range of nations for both girls and boys and a range of sports. But as I'll build on shortly, we have had some challenges with data collection in that there is some data we've had to leave out, and this maybe leads to discussions which go beyond today's presentation. But is there a need for us really to look to try and standardize how we collect participation data, not just within one particular sport, but across all sports, to allow us to really track these young people and their journey through sport, to really start to get into further detail around dropout rates to help us develop strategies to keep them involved. But for the purpose of this research so far, to be included within the sample, we ensured the sport had to have data for both males and females within that particular sport, as we wanted to look at was there any differences in trends between gender. We had age categories ranging from under 8s right up to under 20s. So while the focus of the iCoachKids Plus is in that adolescent age range, we needed the wide sample so we could look at where those dropout trends occurred. And that for each sport that was included in that nation, they had to have a minimum of 3 consecutive age groups. And we had some fantastic data shared from a range of sports and nations where we had huge data sets over many years, which we are starting to explore in more detail. But in other parts of the data, we had much smaller samples of 1 year. So for the purpose of to be included in this initial part of the research, where there was multiple years of data, we averaged that. So we just took data from 2017 to 2019 so that we had a current, up-to-date understanding of participation. As alluded to, sort of previous research has been conducted a number of years ago, so we wanted an up-to-date understanding of where we're currently at. So this is kind of the numbers we've got in the data set so far. So a huge sample and a good spread of data from all the age groups, so under 8s up to under 16s. And then what's really great with the data set and quite novel is we've got quite a wide range of sports from a range of different nations. So hopefully giving us a real good understanding of the landscape across Europe. And this is just some of the initial findings. Obviously, just with time constraints tonight, we just need to keep it at a higher level. But we can see that we are seeing some quite consistent trends within the data, particularly looking at from that under 14s category upwards. And that would be consistent with some of our thinking and some of the other literature. We know there are some significant changes in terms of growth and maturation that occur for both boys and girls in that adolescent period, and that this may impact not on just what they can do physically, but also psychosocially as well. And I think this kind of is some real exciting findings initially that we have, which we can hopefully use to start to really inform some of the e-learning resources alongside the other findings of the other research that's currently ongoing, to start to look at how can we help develop coach education around this period of adolescence to try and keep more children involved in sport longer. Key points just to take away though is that while we do see that trend around adolescence of dropout, and we have thoughts around that, we are starting to explore some of the larger data sets we have within a particular sport or within particular nations, to really do some more in-depth detailed case studies to really start to explore further some different trends between boys and girls, or some particularly interesting trends we are seeing within a particular sport. So we will share those findings once we complete that analysis. But there is a need to keep exploring this further. And as I sort of briefly highlighted, there is a need for us to look at how we can develop a standardized tracking system to ensure that we're not always just taking this cross-sectional approach to analysing dropout by almost like a snapshot approach. And can we develop almost identifier codes for each participant so we can track them through their individual journey through sport, and really start to identify those key periods of dropout. Thanks, Sergio. I'll hand back over to you.
Okay, so thanks a million, Stacey. And before I carry on, I wanted to really recognize the work that Stacey and the rest of the team are doing with this research, because it's not easy research to do. And also the work of the partners is fantastic that they've been able to collect all these data and to analyze it really. We're understanding a lot more about this phenomenon. But we didn't want to stop there. We wanted to actually know a bit more about it really. So what are the next steps really? As well as understanding the trends, which is a complex picture, okay, we also want to understand why kids are dropping out of sport. And of course, this has been looked at in the past, okay? We know that previous research has identified over 150 dropout factors, okay? Now, having said that, less is known about two things, about how these factors interact with each other and with other features of the environment, like the dropout, the age of the child at dropout, or the type of sport, or the country, or the socioeconomic status of the child. And also less is known about the trajectories that children take, really, in terms of some children never join sport, some children join and then drop out, some children drop out and then re-engage, and some children never drop out, okay? So we need to understand a little bit more how that happens. And to do that, we are developing a new youth sport dropout model. And we're trying to conceptualize youth sport dropout as a behavior that can be influenced by pressing the right buttons for different people. We're building this model using something called the COMBI model, which basically says that for a behavior to take place, and in our case, the behavior we want is that children join sport, and stay in sport, three things need to happen. For a child to join sport and stay in sport, they have to have the capability to do that, both in terms of the competence to play sport, but also the competence to join sport. They have to have the opportunity to be able to join a sport session, and they have to have the motivation to do that. When those three things are met, there's a stronger chance that this will happen. So we're turning this model into a youth sport dropout questionnaire, so we can investigate these factors in a large sample. At the moment, the questionnaire is being tested and is being reviewed by 13 experts from all over the world. So far, we have 13 dimensions or groups of factors, so related factors, and 40 questions. And we also have a demographic section because we want to understand the trajectories and how other factors may impact on the child. And it's going to be administered to a large sample of university students across 8 European countries. And that's where we're up to so far. Okay, so watch this space. Hopefully for the next iCoachKids conference, we can give you all the information, all the findings from these studies. Thank you very much. Back to Sheila and see if there's any questions.
Hi, Sergio and Stacey. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. There are lots of questions, but I believe from Gary, I have time to ask one, possibly two. And I guess there's two questions in the question and answer box at the moment. The first one is, how did you define dropout? Is it dropout of a single sport, or is it dropout of sport altogether?
Yeah, I can answer that one. At the moment, it's dropout technically within a particular sport. So we were looking within the data set, and obviously it's quite cross-sectional at the moment. And I think kind of that's what I was a little bit alluding to within the presentation, is because we don't necessarily at the moment within the data set have a unique identifier code for a participant. It's really hard to track that individual participant's journey. So we're almost taking quite cross-sectional snapshots of the number of participants in a particular age group within a particular sport or within a particular nation at that moment in time. So we're not quite sure whether that reflects that exact same participant. And that's kind of, what we're proposing. It needs to be the direction of tracking youth moving forward.
Yeah, and Sheila, if I may come in there, that's also, we're trying to understand that a bit better through the second piece of research, really, the questionnaire, and trying to, see what trajectories people follow, if they drop out of one sport to join another sport, or how that works. Yeah, it's very important. It's a very complex picture. And
Sergio, just to confirm at this point, we are talking about sports rather than physical activity. So it is very much the stats coming from sport.
Stacey, you want to say that one? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, at the moment it's at sport, and at the moment as well, like we're very much at the high level because it's such a huge data set, which is fantastic, but it's taken a lot of time because of the different formats of the data to collate that all into one format. So as well, it's worth noting at the moment that we haven't necessarily been able to fully differentiate between talent development environments and more recreational participation within those sports. But we do have some fantastic data sets within the huge sample where we are going to start, or we are in the process of exploring those in more detail to try and answer some of those questions.
And just one final one, just in relation to, Sergio, you mentioned the trajectory. Do we know how long children are involved before they drop out?
We don't yet from our own studies. Okay, there are previous studies that I've looked into this. It's a very mixed picture. I don't think there is any single pattern, and I think that's something that we're trying to, when we go out with the questionnaire to this large sample from 8 different countries, we're going to ask them to tell us their journey, really. How long were they involved for? How long did they drop out for before rejoining again, if they rejoined? So it is, one of the limitations really of all this research is that actually the experience is very different for every child. And we're trying to find common trends, and that's difficult. And also that's difficult from a practitioner perspective as well. But I think if you want, with the research that we've done so far, we wanted the broad picture. And now with the next batch of research, and hopefully the next 20 years of research, we want to really draw a much more fine-grained picture.
Thank you both so much for, again, the really, really insightful look into your research, and we really look forward to seeing much more of it. We're still on time, which is absolutely wonderful. So thank you both so much, and I'll hand back over to Gary. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Sheila.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Thank you very much, Stacey. And also thank you to Sergio. In fact, Sergio, we're going to stay with you now, as Sergio will introduce the next speaker. So back over to you.
Thanks a million, Gary. Wow, where I start, really, I'm trying to catch my breath, really. Listen, the next presentation is very close to my heart as well. It's going to provide an introduction to the UEFA Playmakers program. This program uses play and storytelling to introduce girls to football, girls aged 5 to 8 years of age, for the first time. The program is very ambitious and aims to develop not only football skills, but also fundamental movement skills and life skills. And to talk about it, we have one of its creators, my good friend Dan Whymark from UEFA. Dan has been a professional football coach in the US and Mexico. He then spent 6 years outside of sport working in legal and digital media industries in the UK. After studying the FIFA Masters in Sport in 2014, Dan then went on to work for Juventus FC in Italy and in an elite football academy in Norway. And then last year in 2019, he joined the women's football unit at UEFA, where he now works on the development of women's football in all of UEFA's 55 national associations. Thanks for joining us, Dan, and over to you.
Hi, Sergio. Thanks a lot for that wonderful introduction. And what I think everyone's going to see is actually a continuation of a lot of the trends that have been discussed previously, which is both nice and consistent, but also great to see that we're on the right track with this project. I just need to share my screen first and foremost, if you'll bear me 1 second. That's an important part of what we need to do. There we go. Is that working? Yes, it is. Good. Excellent. All right, so hello everybody. And yes, thank you. As Sergio said, my task today is to tell you about how the Playmakers program uses play and storytelling to enhance girls' football participation. So getting them into the program and hoping to keep them there. So I'm going to do that by telling you a little bit about UEFA Playmakers inspired by Disney, how the program works, and what its focus is. So first of all, as a brief introduction, I wanted to tell you that the Playmakers project is really aimed at 5 to 8 year old girls that have never played football before. So this is meant to be an introduction to get girls into football for the very, very first time. So we do that through the use of storytelling, of imaginative play, and the partnership with Disney to focus on things like fundamental movement skills, life and football skills, as Sergio said. Now, to do that, we also need coaches that prioritize those things, but also prioritize the needs of the girls as well. And the idea is that what we get at the end is girls that are more healthy, more multi-talented, and more active, and ideally choose football as their activity for life. But as long as they're active, that is objective number one. Now, to start me off, I've got a short video, which hopefully gives a short introduction to the program and why girls will enjoy it. Please let me know someone if you cannot hear it.
We're making it our mission that more girls fall in love with football. To help them be healthy and confident, make friends and learn life skills. Teaming up with Disney, we'll offer an innovative introduction to football through play and storytelling. Want to know more? Take it away, girls. Playmakers! We play with our imagination. We play through stories. longer. We play for fun. We play to believe in ourselves. We play for each other.
There we go. So it always plays twice. So there we go. Skip that through. So wanted to start off with, after that introduction of how the program works, about where the program came from. So you understand the context of the program. And many of you would have seen Time for Action, which is the women and girls football strategy that was released by UEFA in 2019 to carry us through to 2024. Now, I'm not going to go through this at all, but I wanted to highlight it because 3 of its objectives are directly impacted by the Playmakers program. So it is strategically rooted in where we're trying to go in our direction as a unit, both to get more women and girls playing football, to change the perception of women's football across Europe, but also to improve player standards, specifically safeguarding. Now, this came from a need for us when we identified those objectives to define the problem. So we worked with Sergio at Leeds Beckett's University to create an academic literature review, which looked at the best grassroots programs, looked at why girls are motivated to take part in sport and their influences, strategies to encourage participation, and ways to challenge girls through football. And what we were able to pull out of that was a recognition of what our challenge is and what the challenge is for getting girls to play football in the first place. Now, the first is very obvious. It's gender in sport, in the sense that, you know, many of you will agree, or at least experience, that it's seen as a particularly masculine domain. But also, when we get girls actually to come and try our sport for the first time, often the environment isn't right for them. It can be too competitive. It doesn't meet their needs and what they're actually looking for from their activity. But also, there's a barrier to even getting them there, in the sense that some schools don't offer it. Parents don't think of it for their girls either. And so football isn't even considered as an activity for girls. If you take that on another step further, what you end up with is essentially a group or a demographic that doesn't have a skill set that allows them to participate in team activities to a full extent. If you take a 14-year-old girl who wants to try football for the first time, if she doesn't have the fundamental movement skills, the building blocks from when she was young, in this age group 5 to 8, then it's going to be much harder to play football and much less enjoyable as a result. So what we had to identify that, and then that's actually borne out in the statistics too, that girls play later and spend less time playing. And in our statistics here that came out of the academic review and various other places, 84% of girls under 17 don't meet the WHO minimum guidelines. And in our house, in UEFA, in Europe, 0.7% of women are actually registered with their NAs. So, you know, that's a pretty daunting statistic. And so we realized that once we've identified the best practices and identified the challenge, that something needed to be done about that. And the first thing we came across was to create new environments for girls to experience football from a young age. Now, those environments had to avoid mixed sex pathways and avoid overly competitive environments and activities. That isn't to say, of course, that, you know, mixed sex pathways are not an option or don't function. They absolutely do. But our objective was to provide an option for girls at this age that focused on movement skills before football skills. And it was that experience that was really important once we created the environment, to create an experience that really took note of what was important to girls. So that was life skills, teamwork, friendship. It was personal development over performance. So the questions asked are, you know, what did you learn today? Not how many goals did you score today? And that was a really important takeaway for us. But of course, we have to get them in the door. So we had to engage girls in a way that appeals to them. So we have to create a program that a girl wants to take part in, but also their parents are aware of and want to send their girls to. And then when they're in the door, we need to change the way football is coached to them. So changing who is speaking to them and change who they are spoken, how they are spoken to. I'm not going to spend too long here, but I just wanted to raise how important partnerships are in programs like this. We talked about what we did with Leeds Beckett. We also work with the English FA, the national associations deliver the program. But Disney is the case study here for how a program like this can be augmented and improved by a partnership through Disney. So we wanted to use storytelling to attract girls. Well, you know, there is no better company to tell stories to 5 to 8-year-old girls than Disney's, because they have relatable stories that are familiar. They're perfect for our demographic. And in addition, as a brand, they're trustworthy, they're fun, and they're exciting. So it gets girls in. And then from a marketing standpoint, it's hugely powerful, right? So by using storytelling, we get Disney. By getting Disney, we get an unattainable audience. And that unattainable audience is mums and dads. Because if you take an example of a mum of a 5-year-old girl, she doesn't follow the Champions League Twitter feed. I mean, she might, but the chances are that she won't. She probably does, however, follow Disney Social. So if you can take your program, your grassroots football program that uses storytelling and transfer it into the Disney sphere, you can now reach an audience there was no chance of you getting in any other way. So really powerful. And that can be seen with our launch that was launched right before the pandemic in 2020, which took the wind out of the sails somewhat. But you can see here us crossing over from the back page to the front page. This is the Telegraph, the Times, New York Times, the Guardian, all covered this story. And that was because it reached beyond football and reached into the storytelling and really captured the imagination. Now, that is what we're trying to do, and that's the power that storytelling can bring from a marketing aspect. But there's also a very fun aspect as well that you can create by intertwining what we can bring as UEFA and what Disney can bring as an organization as well. So we have a very short video, just 1 minute, that shows you something that the fun things that we can create by working together. So a fun example of the cool things that we can do we use storytelling to get girls to create engaging content to get girls through the door. But once they get here, you're probably asking, okay, well, how do we use storytelling to actually in the program? So the way we do that, and hopefully you can see this clearly if it's big enough on your screen, is we take a story, in this case, a Disney movie, and we break it up into 8 chapters. So each chapter is 1 week. So over 8 weeks or 10 weeks, the girls come and live out a chapter one after the other and live out the movie of Frozen 2 in this case. Now, if you can see big enough on your screen, this is chapter 3, they're in the Enchanted Forest. You can see that the deliverer has some objectives to address, which is, in this case, problem solving, some footballing goals, and some fundamental movement skills. So the girls get to come and arrive and play out their favorite Disney movies while also learning skills. And I use this example, which is one of our other storybooks, which is The Incredibles 2. Now, this is chapter 1, and those of you who've seen the movie, there is a drill going through Municipalburg, stealing all the money from all the underground vaults across the town. Now, in this exercise, one team is on Team Underminer and one team is on Team Incredibles. And so one team has to put the balls behind the drill that they've actually built at the start of the session to give them ownership of the session out of cones. And then the other team, the Incredibles team, are picking up the ball to run to the front of the drill to stop the drill. Now, this is very simple. In practice, you get them just running around in a circle. But what they are doing is they're moving a ball from A to B. they're pivoting, they're changing direction, they're running, they're jumping, they're interacting with each other, they're working as a team. But they're doing all of this in a world that they've created and using their own imaginations to be part of the incredible world. And it's such a hugely powerful tool. When you see these sessions in action, you can really see how impactful that is. And the girls almost learn by osmosis. They learn not by accident because we're designing them to do it, but they're not aware they're doing it. So it's a really, really powerful tool to use storytelling, especially one as powerful as Disney, to tell that story and get girls active. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I'm aware there's so many coaches and coach educators on the call today. So I wanted to address just how we train our deliverers to do this. And we focus a lot on who they're talking to, right? So they are young girls, but also they are perhaps infrequent movers. They have a lot of barriers to participation. You know, where have they come from? You know, what are you delivering? We've talked a lot already about the life skills and fundamental movement skills. Focus on those two first, the football will follow. And then I don't have time, unfortunately, to go into this in too much detail, but creating a positive learning environment and the playmakers approach is so key to try and help them create this world. Now, I've got a couple more slides just to try and stay on time. But obviously we're talking about getting girls in and keeping them there. And without having a proper pathway, it's almost for a waste, because at the bottom of the pyramid is where Playmaker sits. So what we have to do is make sure that pathway continues. So that is actually very important in terms of having a registration process, but also knowing where the girls can go, and also softening that blow when they leave this safe Playmakers environment and go to a club, which is perhaps old school. We need to have coaches that cross the barrier. So the transition of coaching and spreading that methodology is crucial to making sure this program works. And there are multiple strategies there on screen that the NAs are using to do that. But for time, I'm just going to skip past it. And then for my penultimate slide, I just wanted to let you know where the program is being delivered next year. So if you want to look out for Playmaker sessions in your country, you can see them here. The yellow countries being pilot nations, and the red, purple countries being the final, the first year, full year countries. And then to finish, I just wanted to talk about the key results because they're really exciting. Even though the scale has been really reduced by COVID-19, as it has for all grassroots projects, the vast majorities of girls are new to football. In fact, 87% of all girls coming to the sessions have never played football before. Exactly what we're trying to get. But similarly to a theme you guys have all talked about in the last few sessions, getting new coaches and female coaches into the game is also happening. I think 30% of our coaches have never coached football before, 33%, and 60% or 62% are female. So, you know, we're not only getting new girls into the game, but we're getting coaches into the game for the first time, and new women as well. And then finally, to finish, we have also introduced many safeguarding procedures as well. So we're using this program as a platform to strengthen safeguarding procedures and regulations in every NA in Europe as well. So on that, Sergio, I'm sorry I'm a minute or so over, but you know, thank you very much for that very whistle-stop tour of the Playmakers program, and hopefully you'll find it useful.
Thanks, Dan. It is an amazing program, and I've been very lucky to be involved in the program at different stages, really, from inception to evaluation a little bit, and it's just an amazing program. And the feedback that we're getting on the chat of how much people would love to see something like this in their sport is amazing. We've got 1 minute for one quick question, okay? Why 5 to 8 year old girls? Why that age bracket?
We had a challenge. We either had to create the second stage of the pathway and have no one come up, or create the early stage of the pathway and maybe potentially have nowhere for them to go. And with this storytelling aspect, we thought it was a wonderful, wonderful place to start, to build that the base of the pyramid in Europe, and then fill in the gaps, because many NAs have that already. So we thought we'd start with 5 to 8 year old girls, but also because it's so perfect, it's the perfect age. Sergio, I'm sure you'll know more on this, about the age of getting them moving and developing that muscle memory and developing those fundamental movement skills that are so crucial to the program. So that was the main reason.
Perfect. And not a question. I'm just going to leave you with a thought from Christian on the chat. He's challenging us to say, well, actually, the program could work as well for the boys. And there's plenty of Disney material that could be very appealing to boys that haven't had a positive experience of football or that haven't been inclined to join a football club. So that's a challenge that the audience is sending your way. I know you're not busy enough, so just someone.
I have a good answer, but we don't have time.
Okay, well, you can answer that on the chat if you want. Dan, thank you so much for all the work you've done in the program and that continue to do, and for coming on today to talk to our audience. Okay, thanks a million. And back to Gary. Thank you.
Thanks to Sergio, and thanks to Dan as well for an incredible presentation there. As Sergio said, the chat box and the Q&A is really starting to light up. So make sure that you continue the conversation and tag us on social media and hashtag iCoachKids. Let's really grow this global movement and get more people knowing about all of these amazing research findings. I'd now like to welcome one of the iCoachKids founding members. From Sport Island Coaching, we have Declan O'Leary with us, who will chair the next session. Over to you, Declan.
Thank you very much, Gary. And thank you also to the iCoachKids project, the presenters, the partners, and the wider family who are tuning in today. There's certainly a feel within the chat and within what we're hearing about new strategies and a new approach are coming. And I think for coaches, we're being challenged outside our comfort zones. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Catherine Woods. Catherine is going to speak about youth sport dropout. Catherine is based at the University of Limerick at the Department of Physical Education and Sports Science, and she's also a member of their Health Study Institute. Catherine believes that physical activity is a best buy in terms of public health, and she enjoys developing and testing theoretically interventions to test this belief. Her ultimate goal is to find better methods of bringing research, practice closer together to achieve sustainable impact to address the inactivity pandemic. So Catherine will speak on youth sport dropout. Prevention is better than cure. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Declan. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, and thank you to iCoachKids for another wonderful conference, and to Sergio and the team for bringing this all together. It's great to see so many people giving up time to attend this, and great presentations thus far. If I may, I'm just going to share my screen, if that is okay. And can people see my screen? Can just let me know.
We certainly can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for that. So some very interesting conversations already, and some of the notes that I've been taking down include things like that phrase, caretaker of dreams, really nice. A really big challenge to Stacey, Emmonds and her team in terms of data harmonization, but much needed. So brilliant to see that starting off, and best of luck with it. And of course, that wonderful presentation there by the last speaker in terms of football being the conduit to life skills, to fundamental movement skills, and to providing young children with the ownership for their own sport involvement, physical activity, and health literacy. So some excellent presentations. And today I'm going to touch on dropout, youth sport dropout, with the philosophy that prevention is better than cure. So that's just a scene from the University of Limerick, and that's the layout of what I'm going to be covering today. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these statistics, but we know from a lot of data that when children hit 13 or 14, you can see here the Gaelic Athletic Association data from Ireland. You can see here some swimming data from the Netherlands, but we know quite comprehensively now that by the age of 13, 14, there is a real problem with dropout from structured sport among both boys and girls. So, first message, dropout from sport is a challenge that needs to be solved. But what would happen if we could track children's participation over time? And Stacey has already alluded to this and how challenging it is. And this is the results of a small study. You can see both papers represented at the bottom of the screen. A small study we did in Ireland where we managed to track over 800 children over a 5-year period. And we looked at their sport participation levels and how these changed. These are the results of the boys. So we had 265 boys. And in 2009, the top 10 sports that these boys were participating in are listed on your screen here. You can see, for example, that 41% of the sample were playing soccer, 39% Gaelic football, and so on, all the way down to martial arts. 5 years later, go back to those same children, ask them the exact same question, and this was the answer that we got. So you can see that in soccer, there was a dropout, a statistically significant dropout. Gaelic football is looking pretty consistent. Hurling, there was a dropout, and so on and so forth. So by looking at these children at 2 different time points, we can see changes in their pattern of behavior. But what if we were to track the children and see what happens to each child? Well, it becomes slightly different. In terms of the difference here, looking at 2009 in comparison to 2014 is 8%, 1%, 8%, and so on. But let's track the children. Within that, in actual fact, in 2014, 18% of this number had dropped out, 11% from Gaelic football. And at the same time, in 2014, a number of children had joined the sport, and I refer to that as drop-in. So you had a significant movement, and this goes right across all of the different activities. And the orange bars are where the difference, if you just look at the 2 raw data here, you would estimate 1% difference. But in actual fact, 11% of children over the 5 years had dropped out, while 10% had taken up the sport. And if you look at that in graphic form, and I can only put 4 on the figure for clarity. The 2009 data says out of these 265 boys, this was the participation rates in these sports. By 2014, these same boys had changed and the participations had dropped, but not massively. However, in 2014, we know that 18% of those participating in 2009 had left soccer, 11% had left Gaelic football, 11% had left swimming, and 9% had left rugby. Whereas new children had come into the sport in 2014. And remember, these new children will have very different skill sets. They may be joining the sport for very different reasons than the younger children would have been doing 5 years previous. If we look at girls, and we had over 600 girls that we managed to track, you can see the top 10 sports that they were engaging in. In 2009, these are the proportions. And if you compare those exact same children 5 years later, how did the proportions change? Well, similar to the boys, there were decreases. But again, similar to the boys, the differences were not massive. And when you track the children, what you see is that specific children had dropped out quite a lot. So out of 29%, 16% of children were no longer in dance. 18% were no longer in swimming. 10% were no longer in Gaelic football. But by 2014, new children had joined these activities. Again, graphically, 2009 data, compare it cross-sectionally to 2014. This is the picture that you will get, but dig into that data, track your children, and the movement is much more substantial in terms of dropout and drop-in. So the second message, dropout does not have to mean stop. And this is a really important message to all of the wonderful coaches and the volunteer coaches, professional coaches that are involved in this area. Sport-specific dropout does not have to lead to sport general dropout. In other words, if children are moving out of your sport, if we can get them pathways into other sports, other activities, and keep them within the sport family, then that is a really big success. And as you've seen from my data, that drop-in is quite a powerful behavior that we need to really study, as well as dropout in this age group. And this is something that we touched on with a project called Keep Youngsters Involved. And this was funded by the European Council under their Erasmus Sport programme. We had 3 aims on keeping youngsters involved. And the aims were, 1, we wanted to identify factors influencing dropout. 2, develop a framework that would help us those factors, and then create a practical toolkit for in relation to addressing this concept. Our definition of sports dropout was that it was the prolonged absence of systematic practice and competition, either in one sport, that's sport-specific dropout, or in all sports, which is sport general dropout. And what we found was that there were 144 factors identified in the scientific literature. 39 of those were significantly related to dropout, and 14 of them specifically related to prevention of dropout. These are the 14 factors, and I don't really have a lot of time to go through these today in detail, but I am going to direct you to this website here at the bottom of my screen, www.keepyoungstersinvolved.eu. You can download all of the information on the factors, including our full toolkit in relation to the prevention of dropout. What I do want to share with you is that if these factors are present in your club, then they will lead to, or there is more likelihood that they will increase intrinsic motivation, enjoyment, they will improve the social support, they will have a positive environmental support, positive goal orientation, and positive attitude. And these are outcomes that result in prevention of dropout. The other thing I want you to take away is that these factors do not focus at an individual level down here at the bottom, which would be specifically at the child in isolation, but they are a combination through intrapersonal, through the organization or institution, which could be school-related factors, for example, the community where the clubs are generally based, right up to policy. National and regional sport policy can influence the prevention of dropout from sport for children and young people. So how did we Keep Youngsters Involved understand those 18 factors? Well, when we were looking at it, we were informed by Gregory Welk's work on the youth physical activity promotion model. And basically what we saw was, that if you take a child and you have their personal demographics, their age, gender, and so on, and what you're trying to do is understand, how do we prevent dropout from sport from these individuals? Oh, sorry, backwards. Well, the first thing, or the first concept, is that there are certain predisposing factors. In other words, a child will say, one of the key things that help a child to decide whether they're going to drop out or not are 2 questions. Am I able for this sport? And is it worth it? And when they combine, they generate something called predisposing disposition towards the engagement in the sport that will lead to dropout. But also aligned to the predisposing factors and influencing them is something called enabling concepts or factors. And these are factors that are internal to the sports club, but also external to the sports club. For example, the school and school-related factors may be very important here. And on the other side, reinforcing factors. And this are factors to do with the child's parents, the child's peers, and obviously the coach and the child. So in order to prevent youth sports dropout, there are 3 core concepts: predisposing factors, enabling factors, and reinforcing factors. And under each of those factors, the 14 factors we had identified fit. How does this work? Well, under predisposing, there are factors 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 fit out of the 14. These are autonomy, perceived competence, relatedness, expectancies, and values. And within the keeping youngsters involved toolkit, each of these factors has a statement, a good practice statement. Let me give you an example. If we take autonomy, then the good practice statement for a club that has autonomy would be that every youngster who's a part of that club should experience a certain freedom of choice in his or her actions, thinking, and feelings related to his or her sports practice. Every youngster can take the initiative and should experience their behavior as self-organized. In other words, they have a certain level of control and a certain level of choice in relation to the activities they do. That's the good practice we'd like to see in the sports club. But what does that mean in concrete terms? What are the actions that help lead to that? So we went to a whole range of sports clubs across Europe, and we asked them to translate that into what they do, or give us ideas about what they do that could meet an autonomy supportive environment. And we generated these actions. So under the factor called autonomy, this is targeted at coaches and trainers. And this is the action that a coach and trainer could adopt to generate an autonomy supportive environment. That is, for example, ask the youngster about how his or her perfect season would look like and support him or her in achieving it. Equally, there is an autonomy action for the club. Create a youth committee to participate in club decisions. Sharing leadership and decision making with youngsters is sharing on the rewards of sport. And if these actions are in place, the autonomy supportive environment is more likely to be in place, and prevention of dropout under the predisposing factor is more likely to happen. In terms of relatedness, we have the good practice statement, and again, the examples of actions for the club or the coaches. In terms of the reinforcing factors, these are coach-athlete relationship, peer involvement, and parental autonomy support. And again, a good practice statement here would be that every youngster and coach equally should have should have an effective and positive relationship, which includes empathetic understanding, honesty, support, cooperation, and respect. And these are some of the actions that our grassroots clubs told us that they do with their coaches and trainers to generate this coach-athlete relationship, and some of the actions that clubs do to generate the coach-athlete relationship. In terms of the enabling factors, there are 6: a learning climate, time goal balance, cost, prevention policy, accessibility, and type of sport offer. And again, an example of time goal balance, quite a lengthy one. But basically, it's really about trying to get children to understand the skills of time management and enabling that to happen as part of the teaching of your club. And here again is an action that a coach or a trainer can do, and an action that a club could do. For example, organizing sports classes at specific times of the days, or if possible, having dinner or homework sessions within the club to really look after the holistic needs of the child. So the toolkit, and this is available to download from the website that I identified earlier, is for professionals and volunteers who work with youngsters in sport at grassroots level, trainers, teachers, and so on. There are 14 factors that we've identified from the literature to prevent sport dropout. There are movies. And what we've done with these cards that I've shown you, all of these cards here, is we've turned them into a card game. And this helps us generate an environment where we can have a conversation with our coaches and a conversation with our athletes and our players and our participants in relation to youth sports dropout. So by playing this game, there are 126 different cards that represent all of the different factors. They come in this black box here. You put them out on a table. People pick the ones that are really important to them for prevention of dropout. You share them with your table. And then as a group, you identify the ones that are really important for your club. So it is a mechanism of having a conversation, identifying strategies that would work bespoke to your club, and then putting them in action. So take-home messages. So first of all, there is considerable drop-in and drop-out of sport over the adolescent transition periods. Cross-sectional data alone is insufficient, and we need more longitudinal data to really understand this serious challenge. Top reasons for dropout challenge how youth sport is offered to adolescents and school leavers. Work study commitments, lack of interest, taking up too much time, and expenses were common factors that we found. And the KYI toolkit provides a useful resource to get a conversation going between the club, the coaches, the volunteers, and importantly, the children themselves to find out ways bespoke to their needs to prevent youth sport dropout. I'd like to acknowledge the partners on KYI for participating in this research study, and thank you very much.
Catherine, thank you ever so much. Your timekeeping is impeccable. We're just finishing on time. There are lots of questions in the Q&A, which I might ask you to address afterwards. They're around sharing studies and questions about the pathways children took, including whether the research asked the children why they dropped out. So that was very good, and you might, as I say, you might answer those in the questions and answers. The keeping youngsters involved material are very, very useful. And the one thing I would say to all our listeners is that while we have evidence bases, the children you coach will have their own voice. And if you ask them why they're in and out, it'll be massively helpful to you in your coaching, that you can help, the earlier speaker said, serve their needs. So thanks very much, Catherine. And I'm going to hand back to Gary now.
Thank you, Declan, and thank you, Catherine. Again, another insightful presentation. I'm going to reintroduce Sergio Lara-Bercial again to introduce our next speaker. Over to you, Sergio.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks to Declan and Catherine for that presentation. Catherine, I just wanted to acknowledge the amazing work that you've done and the work of the Keep Youngsters Involved project. We are really indebted to that work, and we hope to keep building on all of that with you. So fantastic work. Okay, our next session is titled USA Hockey's American Development Model, Why and Where We Are Now. In 2009, USA Hockey made a seismic shift in its player development initiatives to address three main factors: a rapid decline in new youth participation numbers, a decline in youth player retention rates, and concerns with national team performance. 10 years on, with continued evolution, USA Hockey is now reaping the benefits of a consistent long-term approach. To discuss this fascinating topic, we have with us Ken Martel, Technical Director of USA Hockey. Ken has an extensive background in player development and a long history as a coach with USA Hockey. Prior to taking over the development of the ADM in 2009, Ken served as a coach with USA Hockey's National Team Development Program, coaching in 9 World Championships. He has received multiple awards for his efforts as a coach and as a coach developer. Thanks a million for joining us, Ken. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Sergio. I'd like to thank you and the iCoachKids project for allowing me to really share our story. When I say share, let me try and share my screen here. Hopefully you can all see this. Really, our story, I guess, began back in 2008. Try and give you a bit of a practical example based on some of the things that we've actually been able to do over the long time here. And from our end, it really was back in 2008 when us as an organization came to the conclusion that we really needed to kind of change how our youth sport was being delivered at the grassroots local level. You know, how does a national governing body go on to impact what happens at, you know, field level, court level, or in our case, ice level? And for us, the starting point was really this. And I think right away, Jill, in our opening panel discussion, she talked at the end about a love for the game, a love for what it is that kids do. So for us, it was starting with this statement, you know, and it's not just a hockey specific thing. I think this really applies to all sports, right? You For us, it really was, well, where's the love? Looking at that youth sport experience, what's the experience every child is having? So where did we start? Well, for us, our mission statement really was to get more American kids to play, love, and excel in ice hockey. And when I say excel, it really was about each individual's own experience and how they personalize that. We thought deeply about, what was being delivered, and not just the players that turn out to be high performance athletes, but the vast majority of kids that come to sport. How is USA Hockey contributing to their overall development and impacting them really as human beings? So as Sergio said, 3 major challenges: declining youth retention, declining registration numbers. And we did have some concerns at our world ranking because as Americans, we kind of wanted to be good at whatever it is that we try and do, just like everybody else. As you can see from this particular chart, from about 1990 to 2000 or so, our organization really doubled in size. Massive growth for us in terms of the number of kids participating. But somewhere around 2000, something started to happen to us where we were losing male youth players. Our overall numbers were still on the increase, which was a nice problem to have in terms of more adult players coming to our sport. Our numbers, female players, was growing, and we're very proud of that. Yet core business has always been that male youth player, and why were they leaving? So our numbers were getting disguised a little bit. And we had a drop, as you can see, from about 2000 to 2008, a large decline in the number of kids participating. And these numbers, where it only shows maybe 21,000 or so that we were down, that again is being masked because we're looking at total youth players and not just the male numbers. So again, our female participation was on the increase, which is something, again, we're proud of. But for us, we were bleeding out every year reduced numbers of children playing. So this was a real big concern, especially for people like myself and the others that work at USA Hockey, where we're like everybody else involved in sport. We have a real passion for our game, and it was difficult for us to understand why kids might not have the same love that we had. Why were they leaving? So we decided to make some changes, and the principles that really we looked around were, first, age appropriateness. For us, what we're delivering to kids, was it matching the needs of the kids at every age and stage through their growth and development? Physical literacy was also important to us, and maybe not just when we think of it from a physical movement standpoint, but from a confidence, competence, an overall holistic approach to the kids' well-being and development. That was really important to us because kids only come to ice hockey for a couple of hours a week. And we looked at the big picture and said, what are we doing for the kids' overall development here? And how do we fit within their life and the time that they spend with us? Can we contribute to that overall wellness and well-being? And that ties in with multi-sport participation. Also important to us in telling our kids and our families that it is important to go and play other sports. At the highest level of our game, the National Hockey League is the pro league globally that has the best players. And 98% of the players that play in that league reported in 2018 that they were multi-sport athletes till at least 14 years of age, and the majority till at least 16. So multi-sport participation is something that we promote and try and develop strategies to help diversify for our kids. Then when we come back to the delivery of our sport, really back to that play, very important for us, a games-based approach. And as Catherine alluded to, autonomy, thinking about where kids make the most choices, where do they have the most control about their experience? And it's within that play environment. So can we create training sessions to where when they show up at the sport, they're having fun, they're enjoying themselves, they have more autonomy, and we do things more from a play games-based approach. And then we looked at, where do we increase accessibility? what are the barriers to entry to our sport, and how do we increase engagement in helping our local programs develop strategies to address that. And the last thing is really a safe environment, because we know as a youth sport provider, if kids and families don't feel that it's safe, they're not showing up. So really important there as well. Some things that we had to do early on to make changes from a board of director level. These are things that in an organization at 60,000 feet, having that oversight and leadership, our board was able to make some changes that mandated structurally things that happened within our sport. And the first thing was changing the playing surface size for our kids. And while that may sound something very simple, we're a sport that has been involved. We've had pro ice hockey professionally. Have played our sport for over 100 years. So we've been around a little bit of time. And we historically have been having kids at 6, 7, 8 years of age play on the same size ice surface as the adult professionals, which we know doesn't make much sense. But when you start to step in to make changes along those lines, you're changing culture, and those aren't always easy. So creating a playing surface that fits the kids was really important for us. Changing and eliminating body checking at a young age. Again, we're a physical contact sport, and that certainly there's culture in our sport around that. So that was a difficult change. We discontinued having a 12 and under national championship. We thought as an organization, if we're promoting long-term development, we're promoting patience for our clubs, putting together an event that incentivizes people to sort of aggregate kids and the better players together at a really young age is very hypocritical of an organization like us. So our board discontinued national championships. We eliminated national player development camps, things that we're working on from a national team perspective. It's just too young to start, too many changes. And again, it puts pressure on the system downstream. So we took our responsibility very seriously there about eliminating some things, where at least that we're publicly facing, where we knew we couldn't be hypocritical about what we did. And then the last thing, where I think this group is very interested in, it's mandating additional coach education, helping build an awareness in our coaches of what might be age appropriate, how to develop more autonomy, how to deliver our sport better at the grassroots level. So the working plan for us as an organization was initially establish a partnership with our professional league here in North America, and use their resources to help us carry that message, because they are very influential. They're in the public media and public face. So that was important. Then probably the greatest impact that we had was hiring some really high qualified colleagues of mine that are out in the field, and people, boots on the ground. Our regional managers are people that are knowledgeable professionals that show up to help local organizations and local coaches just be better at what they do, put on a friendly face, help people solve problems in their environment, instead of always pushing things necessarily from the top down. It is really us as an organization trying to think deeply about our impact and what happens at the grassroots level, at ice level, because we know that is what has true impact on our players and their experiences. And then we started really this process at the youngest age groups. We understood that if we're going to get things going right and change our perception of our sport, we had to affect the new kids coming in. So spending time getting kids into our sport and getting them started on the right foot was most important to us. And then we would build up as we went from there. And then for us also establishing some best practices where we can share ideas and things with coaches and our local programs on how to help retain kids, how to deliver our sport better. And then obviously from a communication standpoint, informing our local leaders, getting local champions on board was important, utilizing our elite players and people from the National Hockey League to help carry our message. And then a big one I think most sport organizations will find when they look deeply and really kind of lift over the stone and look at what's going on locally, we find that a lot of programs, state organizations for us, put rules and legislation and bylaws that sort of work against the players. They make life very easy for the adults involved in our sports, but yet go against things that we know might not be as player-centered as we really want. So our staff has spent a lot of time trying to help uncover the things out in the field that go against creating the best possible experience for our kids. The next was creating correct sized equipment and field size, playing surface size for our kids, as we talked about. Creating an environment that's fun and engaging for our kids. We've looked at a lot of the research that's out there, work that I'm sure a lot of people on this conference are familiar with. Amanda Visick and her research on fun have tried to really incorporate things. We say we take fun very seriously. Again, that comes back to that games is a significant portion of practice. Kids don't sign up for youth sport to work at it. They come to play. So for us, it's really thinking about that play aspect and then providing a better sequencing for what it is that we're doing. Thinking deeply about age appropriateness and what's happening at each stage. Creating that environment that's challenging, but really meets the kids, again, where they're at. And then the last couple of items here that were of importance to us is that dose and duration, youth coaches and people that are involved, those are the things that we do control, how much time we're spending. And what we were finding in our sport was the fact that we were treating our kids at 8 years of age, providing similar things and similar programming to what was going on maybe at 18. And we know those things don't line up. We know that it's important for them to take some time maybe away from our sport, to go do other things, to broaden that experience so that when they do come, spend quality time in our sport. So dose and duration were important. And then the last thing was we had youth programs that were creating the same team sizes that our professional teams had. And that doesn't provide a great experience when kids show up at competition. When we wanted smaller teams, smaller roster sizes, so that when children show up to a competition to play, everyone plays and everyone plays a lot. So those are some of the major changes that we've gone through. And then lastly, really connecting with stakeholders and understanding the messaging that they were delivering at the local level. And whether that's the kids involved, the parents, the coaches, the clubs, the facilities, our internal structure, what's the message being delivered? And I have a cartoon that's up here on the screen. We had a local program that, for example, that sent out 2,000 flyers into their local community saying, hey, come play ice hockey, come give it a try. And nobody showed up. And they had this wonderful paragraph written about the qualities that we all know youth sports can bring. Yet this was the picture that was at the top of the screen. And they couldn't figure out, well, why no one showed up. And if I'm a new parent thinking about, why would I bring my kid if that's what my child's going to look like when they're done? So helping craft the message, helping understand the messaging that's going on within your sport, really at the grassroots level, helps us understand the experience that our organizations and our coaches are providing. So that was really important. So where are we at now? To kind of wrap things up. These numbers are for 2018, 2019. COVID kind of in our registration sort of hit the tail end of things. So our numbers are a little bit off this past season, but really looking at where we're at. And again, this is total youth numbers. So we're pleased that we've made some progress here in our total numbers that have grown. But I think for a sport like us, the things that really matter most are that retention. And as you can see, our retention numbers have improved considerably. The kids that were 7 that came back as 8, we still have a lot of work to do. Still 25% of the kids that came to try our sport at 7 didn't come back at 8 years old. So 25% is a lot. We have our work cut out for us. But as you can see, our numbers are, we're up. We're doing well or much better. We lose track of things at 14 and above because of where registration goes and the avenues to participate in our sport in our country. We lose track a little bit from a statistical standpoint, but we do understand that those numbers are up as well. So we're trending in the right direction. And just as a outside corroboration to that, here's a stat from 2017, a tweet that was put out by the Aspen Institute looking at youth sport, taken from the sport and fitness industry, looking at participation. And as you can see, things were moving in the right direction. So here we are since 2014-15, growth in every age category, retention at every age. If you lump all those kids together, from 9 to 14, 91% returning to the sport. Still can improve, got room to improve, but overall records and membership, and then early adopters showing some, improvement from a performance standpoint as well. Some of our national teams have had some success. We're producing more, and a broader player pool at the elite end. So those that think that focusing on participation, focusing on grassroots sport isn't the right strategy to help have greater gains at a performance level is absolutely the wrong message, the wrong thing. They are certainly intertwined. And I'm going to leave you with this last picture because this is the image that we want to portray to our youth coaches, our youth clubs, the people that deliver our youth sport experience. When kids come to ice hockey, we want them to think about this, creating this playground for our kids, and we want our adults to understand that this is what we're trying to deliver. So thank you for the time, and maybe there's a question or two that I might be able to answer.
Thanks, Ken. Absolutely delighted to see your presentation, really. I think the first time I came across your work was in 2013. I think I was in Colorado for a conference at the USOC, and you presented. And at the time, you didn't have the stats to prove that this was working, okay? But it was so refreshing to see, and I'm so happy that over time it's really paid off. You've been ice breaking, let's call it, in the US, and really I know that a lot of the other governing bodies, USA Basketball, Soccer, Football, are now trying to replicate what you've done. We've run out of time for questions because we need to move on to the next session, but inspirational as always. Thank you so much. I think people have taken so much from it, and keep up the good work. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Ken. Over to Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio, and a huge thanks to Ken again. I would now like to welcome our partners from DSJ. So please welcome Katharina Morlang, Patrick Janker, and Heike Hulser, who will introduce our next speaker. Hi, guys.
Hi, and thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to our next presentation. My name is Katharina Morlang, and together with my colleagues Heike Hulser and Patrick Janke, give me your hands. Yes. We represent the German sports youth, and together we drive the project iCoachKids forward in Germany. The German sports youth represents all youth sports organizations in Germany, and we are very happy to be a partner of the follow-up project iCoachKids Plus. For this reason, we are also participating in this huge conference, and we are happy to be part of it. The German sports youth developed together with the University of Erlangen in Bavaria a concept for developing the personality and the team in sports. For the past 5 years, we also have been supporting coaches in Germany, especially together with the German Olympic Sports Federation. We want that coaches in Germany receive a good education, that children and young people receive the best possible support of their coaches, and that they can grow up healthy and are made strong for life. Martin Muche, research assistant at the University of Erlangen, an important key partner for us, will now explain to us the concept of personality and team development in sport, which clearly uses the sport itself and targets methods in sport to develop the team make the team and the athlete more successful. Martin, if you want and if you are ready, you can start now and we will discuss later.
Yes, I'm ready. And I thank you, Katharina, for the friendly introduction and also your reference to our long-standing cooperation in the field of children and youth sports. A positive, realistic self-confidence of the athletes and a good task cohesion within the training group contributes to a long-lasting attachment of athletes in sports. That's why I want to talk about the promotion of psychosocial resources with you today. Dear colleagues and dear coaches in the field of children and youth sports, thank you for joining my presentation today. The topic of my presentation is preventing dropout through the development of psychosocial resources. For that, I do not only want to talk about the interconnection between psychosocial resources and dropout from a scientific perspective. Rather, I want to present specific measures for the promotion of those psychosocial resources which contributes to the prevention of dropout. A wide range of these measures is collected in our unique conceptual framework, personality and team development in sport, which Katharina also mentioned before. And now I have to go to my presentation that it runs better. So, if I say we have a unique framework, I should explain to which extent our framework is unique. There are 5 points I would like to discuss in more detail today. First, our framework takes a close look which psychosocial resources children need to solve the requirements of different sports. Second, the framework enables the promotion of psychosocial resources which are helpful for the prevention of dropout. Third, the framework has a systematic approach with targets and suitable measures to reach these targets. The specific measures are suitable for everyday training, and the framework grew over years from scientific and practical evidence and for practicable feasibility. The first conceptual framework was called Promotion of Psychosocial Resources and was developed by Professor Ralf Zygosz. A presentation at a forum for youth sports in 2001 became the starting point for a long-standing interactive knowledge exchange between science and practice. During the following years, the initial framework was adapted to 5 sports. Additionally, the conceptual framework was scientifically evaluated in the sports of handball and artistic gymnastics. This evaluation study was conducted by our esteemed colleague Christian Hermann and Professor Ralf Zygosz. In all these projects, we learned a lot about the practical implementation of our scientific idea. What we've learned is summarized in the new conceptual framework, Personality and Team Development in Sports. All measures I present today refer to this new conceptual framework. When developing the conceptual framework, the guiding question was, what resources do children and young people need in order to learn effectively in sports, to perform optimally, and to stay attached to the sport in the long term? It quickly became clear that this requires not only conditional, motor, or tactical resources, but also things like self-confidence, the ability to cooperate, cohesion, and concentration. In other words, resources that lie in the psychosocial area. Psychosocial resources also play an important role in the prevention of dropout. Several studies and also the presentation of Catherine Woods today indicate that it is more likely that athletes will maintain their activity if they have a positive, realistic self-confidence and if they are well integrated into a training group. Due to this relationship, I will present the structure and the measures of our conceptual framework by using examples for the promotion of self-confidence and task cohesion. For the promotion of self-confidence, cohesion, and for more targets, we used a systematic approach to describe resources, develop targets, and choose appropriate measures. To this end, we have taken a close look what scientific evidence tells us about these psychosocial resources. We discussed with experts from selected sports which resources are important in their sport and to which outcome these resources should be promoted. We call these outcomes for the psychosocial development key targets. Also, together with the experts from the selected sports, we considered which sport-specific methods aim at these key targets. or respectively, how the key targets can be achieved in everyday training. All measures for the promotion of psychosocial resources are divided into 3 interconnected areas. In the green area, we describe methods for the planning of everyday training, like picking up current experiences or arranging special exercises for the promotion of psychosocial resources. In the red area, we describe principles for shaping the coach-athlete relationship. And in the yellow area, we describe principles for influencing the athlete-athlete relationship. Now let's have a close look at the examples of the resources, targets, and measures, starting with the promotion of athletic self-confidence. If athletic self-confidence contributes to stay attached in sports, we should consider what constitutes athletic self-confidence, to which outcome we want to promote it, and how we can promote it. The athletic self-confidence includes all the assumptions a person makes about his or her own sporting skills. The athletic self-confidence also includes the individual's conviction that he can apply his sporting skills successfully, also in challenging situations. The athletic self-confidence is influenced by experience of success and failure, by direct and indirect feedback, and by self-comparisons. But to which outcome should the athletic self-confidence be promoted? Successful athletes are usually characterized by the fact that they have a realistic self-concept and a positive expectation of their self-efficacy. In other words, the athlete knows about his skills to control the 7-meter throw. In addition, he is confident that he can master the 7-meter throw even short before the end of the game in case of a tie. Therefore, we have chosen the key target: the athlete possess a positive, realistic self-confidence of his sporting skills. And how can athletic self-confidence be promoted in everyday training? Training and competition offer numerous situations that have an effect on athletic self-confidence. Coaches can pick up these situations and use them for the promotion of self-confidence. For example, it makes a difference if coaches evaluate the success of their team based just on the win or loss of the game, or if they acknowledge the performance of the athletes regardless of the game's result. Often a hard-won, narrow defeat is based on a better performance than a clear victory. Here, coaches should base their feedback on the actual shown performance. In addition to these existing situations, there are specific exercises to arrange situations in which athletes deal with their athletic abilities. One suitable exercise for the promotion of self-confidence is the accompanying self-assessment. Before and after training session, the athletes are asked to give themselves a grade for how they master a special technique. Let us go back to the example of the 7-meter throw. There are several techniques to master a 7-meter throw, and handball players practice these techniques frequently. Before a training session for the 7-meter throw, the athlete rates their ability to show techniques like shooting straight, shooting with the rotation of the ball, shooting with the bounce of the ground, or shooting a lob. Then the athletes start their technique training. Afterwards, each athlete has to give him or herself another school grade for these techniques. Now, the coach can ask the athletes to compare the grades and to explain what they can see. If the grades have changed, the coach can encourage the athletes to find explanations for these changes. As an example, if an athlete's assessment has improved, he could attribute that to the effort he put into training today. There are many reasons for these deviations that athletes will detect. With the help of the accompanying self-assessment, the athletes get a direct feedback about their athletic skills, and they are enabled to reflect their self-concept. Besides these methods, the development of self-confidence also benefits from a good athlete-athlete relationship. If a fearless learning climate exists in the training group, athletes can challenge their limits, mistakes are accepted as part of the learning process, and the athletes support each other with helpful feedback on their performance. You can find more measures for the promotion of self-confidence in our manual. I would like to go further on to the promotion of task cohesion. If cohesion contributes to stay attached in sports, we should consider what constitutes cohesion to which outcome we want to promote it, and how we can promote it. Cohesion in sports includes both the willingness of a group to achieve selected goals together, as well as the willingness of the individual athlete to contribute to group performance with the fulfillment of individual tasks. In order to deal with sporting challenges, a good task cohesion is required. In order to prevent dropout, social cohesion in the training group is also important. Task cohesion and social cohesion are mutually dependent. The cohesion is influenced by common goals of the group, common rules, rituals, and a clear distribution of tasks. But to which outcome should task cohesion be promoted? Successful teams have a strong task cohesion. They have developed common goals, and each individual contributes to the team performance with his or her individual strengths. Each athlete is willing to do his or her best to achieve the goals of the team. In other words, even while competing for a starting place in the next competition, a judoka helps her teammate to improve her skills. Therefore, we have chosen the key target. The training and competition group uses task cohesion to achieve common goals in training and competition. But how can task cohesion be promoted in everyday training? Training and competition offer numerous situations that have an effect on task cohesion. Coaches can pick up these situations and use them to promote task cohesion. For example, the lineup for a training competition does not necessarily have to be determined by the coach. The task of determining the lineup can be given to the athletes. Afterwards, they analyze together with the coach how well the lineup works. Successful lineups should be used for a point game. In addition to these existing situations, there are specific exercises to arrange situations in which the training group deals with the distribution of different tasks. In the exercise called Judo Course, the coach arranges a sequence of different judo tasks, which can be mastered in small teams. Each judoka has to take over at least one active task, and they have to master the course together. After first run, the judokas can consider how they can master the course faster in the next run. In this way, the athletes playfully deal with the distribution of tasks in a competition. In order to promote task cohesion, when designing the coach-athlete relationship, coaches have to take into account that athletes need space for co-determination and participation. This includes that coaches justify the team lineup based on clear criteria and discuss the lineup on an equal footing with their athletes. These were only some examples for the promotion of task cohesion, and you will find also for that more measures in our manual. Because I will now show you some thoughts about the scientific evidence and the practical feasibility of our concept. Right from the start of the concept development, practitioners frequently asked us about the feasibility of the concept and the effectiveness of the measures. For both, I will try a short answer based on our evaluation research study. For the study, we accompanied 26 coaches over a period of 8 months in realizing the methodical measures. All coaches were given manuals as well as monthly newsletters, and they were trained in preparatory and advanced workshops. The coaches planned the training sessions during this period independently. For the effectiveness of our measures, we got some indications from the problem-centered interviews during the study. The coaches reported positive effects on the promotion of self-concept and task cohesion. One coach notes that the self-confidence of her athletes became stronger and even more realistic. For the task cohesion, another coach stated that her team has grown together during the time of the study. For the feasibility of the concept, we have seen that all coaches developed a deep understanding for the promotion of psychosocial resources, but they gave us also an important hint why the concept worked for them. In the interviews, the coaches told us that especially the workshops with practice of the methods and reflection on the application were important for the feasibility of the concept. Moreover, that leads to the next step we have to face together with the German sports youth. We need to create opportunities for coaches to get knowledge about the promotion of psychosocial resources, to try methods from the framework, and to reflect on their action in coaching youth sports. A first step on our way is done with a new manual, which is available on the website of the German Sports Youth since today. Nevertheless, we have still much work to do to implement the framework as part of coaches' education. Now for a short conclusion, I have shown you several aspects of our conceptual framework, from the focus on the requirements of different sports, over the systematic approach and the specific measures, up to the effectiveness and the feasibility of the measures. Finally, coaches who use our conceptual framework to develop strong psychosocial resources in their athletes can also become better at developing their athletes' motivation to stay attached to sports in the long term. Now my presentation time ends. I say thank you for your interest, and I'm looking forward if there's any time for questions.
Yes, thank you so much that you shared some insights from POT, Martin. Thank you for the presentation. There are no questions at the moment in the Q&A box yet, and we have 20 past 8, so I will hand over back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Katarina, Heike, and a big thanks to Martin for another incredibly insightful presentation. Moving on to our next presentation, I would now like to welcome one of the iCoachKids founding members, Nicolette Schipper van Veldhoven from the Netherlands, who will chair our next session. Hi, Nicolette.
Hi, Gary. Well, very pleasure again to be here, and it's a very interesting evening, and so I'm looking forward to day 2 already. And it's also a joy to be a partner in iCoachKids. It's very enjoying and enthusiastic to be in favor of sport and children. And the next presentation is a subject near to my heart, and it's presented by the Special Olympics International. And Special Olympics has long been known as a provider of sport opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities, but was often more associated with older teens and adults. We'll introduce the developmental sports, which has grown out of the need identified to support youth athletes with ID to transition from play-based movement skill programs into structured sport in a fun, engaging, age and developmentally appropriate way. Fiona will explore how existing programs like Unified Sports can be applied as a strategy to reduce youth sport dropout by providing an alternative format for ongoing engagement in sport. And Fiona Murray, who will present, is the Director Coaching and Education of Special Olympic International, and she worked in disabled sport for almost 2 decades. At the national level with Special Olympics Ireland and Paralympics Ireland, and now at an international level in Special Olympics. Fiona's primary responsibility in Special Olympics is to drive the creation of resources and systems to support the development of coaches across the globe, ensuring that athletes with ID get access to sports coaches who have the skills and knowledge to facilitate their growth as athletes and as people, leading to better health outcomes, greater social inclusion, and people with ID and more positive, fun experiences. So I'm looking forward. Unfortunately, Jennifer Hansen, who would co-present this presentation, could be there, so Fiona will do it herself. So Fiona, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicolette. I'm just gonna share screen here. So my colleague Jennifer has can you see the screen, everybody? A thumbs up maybe? And someone there?
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Okay. My colleague Jennifer unfortunately wasn't able to be here today, but what she is what she has done is prepare her presentation on video, so I will share that with you now.
I don't hear her, Fiona.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Fiona, you may have to.
Yeah, I think I just didn't share the screen correctly.
That's right. You have to stop sharing and then click on the little tick box that says share video.
Here now.
Yes.
We are global as an organization. When I say we have programs, that is typically a country or a state program. For example, where I'm at, we have Special Olympics Minnesota. Each of our Special Olympics programs are their own nonprofit organization. And at the international level, we provide our local programs with resources and tools to support what it is they're trying to accomplish. Children can join Special Olympics at the age of 8 and participate in competition. However, as an organization, we found that kids aren't always ready at this age to be competitive. And so what I'm about to share with you that we've created with developmental sports helps to solve that issue. So I want to talk a little bit about why sports at this age is so important. And when I say this age, developmental sports is meant to support children between 6 and 12 with and without intellectual disabilities. So what we all know, we're on this call because we know sports are important, but I thought this visual was really great and helped push that point a little further. And it's from our partners here in the States called Project Play as part of the Aspen Institute. I would recommend looking into them if you haven't already. But it says here that children that are more physically active become more active adults. I love the stat that children of active moms are 2 times more likely to become more active. There's a lot of focus on gender equity in sports, and this is a great point. Being active in sports helps reduce the risk of diabetes, heart conditions. It gets children through school. So it's just an important point that we like to make to our programs as they're trying to figure out how they're going to reach youth and why it's important. So Special Olympics starts at the age of 8, which I shared with you. However, about 15 years ago, a lot of parents wanted to start their children earlier with us. So we created this program called Young Athletes. It's a gross motor skills and play program for kids 2 to 7 with and without disabilities. In 2019, globally, we had 580,000, a little over than that, of young athletes around the globe, which is really exciting. But we found that children were doing young athletes and not transitioning on to sports practice at the age of 8. So we needed to consider why that was happening. And what we found out is we didn't create an opportunity within young athletes that fully prepared a child to go into sports practice. So we decided to create a set of resources I'm going to share with you now. A little bit more about the point of young athletes not meeting the needs of kids. In young athletes, we taught skills like walking and running, balance and jumping, things of that nature, but we weren't talking about the core fundamentals of sports, competition basics, sport rules, things of that nature that kids really need to succeed. And this was our pathway. The kids could go from young athletes to competitive sports or recreational sports. But as you can see, that middle part there is where kids were really dropping off because they weren't quite ready for us yet. So we decided to create a more complete pathway with our developmental sports program. So the idea and concept is after young athletes, a child can do these developmental sports skills activities, and then they can choose when they move on in Special Olympics to go into competitive or recreational sport. We have both as an option for our athletes, as not all athletes want to get gold at World Games. They just want to have fun. So what does our developmental sports program do and what does it mean? We have put a set of resources around supporting children 6 to 12 years old. These are age-appropriate sports skills resources. We encourage, at the guidance of iCoachKids, that the experience is a multi-sport experience and that the children are participating in training without competition. But I do want to say we teach about competition, we encourage small and local competitions, just not large medaled competitions. Currently with developmental sports, we have partnered globally with sporting organizations. And what we said is what are you doing with youth at this age range? What lessons do you use in basketball? And for example, we work with FIBA, and they provided us with their mini basketball lessons. So we've shared that out with our Special Olympics audience. And then on top of that, at Special Olympics, we have created adaptations by sport for our programs to use. So while they're doing the mini basketball lessons, they also have a set of adaptations that address needs like sensory processing issues, or maybe if a child's in a wheelchair, there's adaptations in consideration of that. These are the sports we're formalized, have resources for, but there are dozens of others that programs are doing at this time in this age group. Our resources live on this landing page that I will make sure that is sent out after this presentation. And these are all our partners helping to support and strengthen what is happening with youth 6 to 12. So this isn't just the effort of Special Olympics. This is an effort of everyone on this page saying, keeping kids in Special Olympics is important, and we're willing to share our resources with you to make that successful. What are we doing during COVID? That's a very good question. You know, it is a huge pause on our lives, and it is causing some distress, and we want kids to be active. But what it's doing for us as program development staff is the opportunity to create better resources. Since I'm not traveling, I've spent a lot of time focusing on our content and making sure once kids do go back to sports, they're able to do that in a really successful way. The other thing that we're doing in Special Olympics is taking things like our developmental sports resources and training our programs on what they are and how to use them, so that when kids can go back to play, we have a bunch of properly trained individuals. And we have shifted our focus. We have all the resources on how to work with kids or for kids to participate in sports, but now we need our coaches training. So what does that mean? We are creating a youth sports coaches training in conjunction with Paracoach, who you may have heard of, that will train our coaches globally.
Oh, I'm sorry. Seem to have a problem there. Just 1 second.
International training. So what does that mean? We are creating a youth sports coaches training in conjunction with Paracoach, who you may have heard of, that will train our coaches globally on how to work with the entire athlete, which leads me to this point. What did I share just now that means anything to you who might be listening? What we found at Special Olympics, and maybe this is what you'll find, that when working with youth, we needed to rethink how we were working with them to keep them engaged in our programming. We needed to meet their needs rather than expecting them to meet ours. We had to change things. We had to look at things in a different way to keep them engaged with us. They are our future adult athletes, and we have to keep them involved. We are working on properly training our coaches, as I mentioned, which is hugely important. And we're working on all of this through partners. So if you're interested in increasing participation of people with disabilities within your sporting organization and would like some advice on that, you can contact myself or my colleague Fiona Murray, and we will gladly share that with you. If you have questions about how to engage children with disabilities, we'd love to chat. Or if you didn't see your sport listed on that slideshow and you would like Special Olympics athletes to give your sports a try, please come to us. We love partners. Partners are our favorite. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. It was short. There's lots more to share. Please email me anytime for any questions you have.
Okay, thanks, and apologies for the technical hitches there, the best laid plans. So following on from Jennifer's presentation, what I wanted to do was present to you a little bit about our unified sports program and how we've seen it being used to good effect to reduce youth sport dropout. So for those of you who don't already know what unified sports is, it is an inclusive program that's offered in Special Olympics where players with and without intellectual disabilities train and compete on a team together. And really the purpose of it is that it is a quick path to social inclusion, to friendship. And that's the primary motivation of unified sports. And some of the data we have around unified sports already, you'll see in the top right of the screen there, looking at the athletes. So we refer to the participants with intellectual disabilities as athletes and those without as partners. So the athletes, over 80% of them report having more friends without intellectual disabilities after participating in unified sports. They report exercising more. And the partners without intellectual disabilities, almost 80% of those report having a much better understanding of people with intellectual disabilities. But what I also want to draw your attention to is the big 94 in the top left of the screen. So 94% and 91% respectively of athletes and partners together report that they feel healthier after participating in unified sports, but also that their sports skills are improving. And I think that's a really important factor, because sometimes we focus on the area of inclusion and we forget that there is actually a sports benefit associated with unified sports. So I wanted to share with you a case study from a youth soccer team in the US. And the reason I'm focusing on this example in the US is that we typically had unified sports in the United States operating in a school environment. And this is an example of a community-based program, which I think has wide implications around the world. So it's Holden Youth Soccer, which is based in Massachusetts. And they decided to establish a unified sports team about 2 years ago and focused on the age group of 12 to 15 years old for two reasons. One, it's a standard age group for Special Olympics, so that increases access to competition. But also that was that age group where they were seeing there was a large drop off of the players without intellectual disabilities within the club. So particularly focusing on those players, as I said, many of them were at risk of dropout, and this provided an opportunity for them to continue to play sport without that very highly competitive elite tracking youth sport, and gave them an opportunity to still also do something what they felt that was meaningful in their community. For the players without intellectual disabilities, there were two real main categories of players. There were those who didn't have a suitable competitive program and as a result had dropped out of sport participation. And then there were those players who were participating in top soccer, which is a station-to-station skill-based program, and really needed an opportunity to gradually transition into a team environment. And the benefits were not just for the players involved, but for the clubs and for Special Olympics, there was a huge benefit. So from the club perspective, this was a great opportunity for them to promote values of inclusion and acceptance within the club environment. As I said, to retain or even regain some players that had dropped out. And in terms of supporting particularly the players with intellectual disability, it gave them access to Special Olympics coaches who were specifically trained to do this, but also access to competitions that were specifically tailored for inclusive teams. And of course, very importantly for any club, it gave them an opportunity to access additional funding to support this programming. For Special Olympics, again, focusing on the idea of promoting inclusion and acceptance, but also giving access, which can often be a huge problem in Special Olympics, to training facilities, to club infrastructure, and to sport technical coaches. And of course, expanding the presence of Special Olympics in the local community. So I wanted to share just two quick examples of where this particular team of 14 players, where there was a really significant impact. So in two players in particular, and I've called them Brian and Charlie, not their real names, both had played school football in their elementary school days, but unfortunately had dropped out because they really had reached a point where they were no longer able to keep up, both from a sport technical perspective, but also socially with their peers without intellectual disabilities. And what Unified Sports did was offer them an opportunity to play in a more supportive environment and to continue to develop both socially, but also in terms of their football skills at their own pace with coaches who were specifically trained to support their additional needs. And in a really, really positive turn of events, both of those players have now actually rejoined their regional competitive high school programs. So playing in a mainstream league with mainstream teammates. So really positive outcome there. And then the second was looking at some of the players without intellectual disabilities. And I mentioned previously that these are the cohort of kids that we've heard talked about over and over again at that transition, that school transition, that are at high risk of dropout. And in most of the cases of the players in this team, they were at a level that they were unfortunately no longer maybe making the cut on the competitive teams, or were no longer interested in that highly competitive environment. And unified sports gave them that chance to continue to play sport that they loved, but just that they felt they were no longer fitting into, but also making a really meaningful contribution to their peers and to their local community. But above all else, it gave them an opportunity to stay fit, stay healthy, and stay engaged in sport. So again, a very positive outcome here, where players who would otherwise have left this sport and potentially left sport altogether are now still playing. So what's next for us in terms of unified sports, and particularly in developmental sports that Jennifer referenced earlier? We of course want to continue to engage more and more players with and without intellectual disabilities through age and developmentally appropriate sports. As Jennifer mentioned, we are focusing on some work with Paracoach at the moment to develop some coach training and coach education resources, specifically targeting youth sport age groups. And then finally, and I was heartened by Ken's comments earlier that a number of years back, they lacked the data to really support this trend that they were seeing of greater retention of players. We obviously need to continue to research this to really understand how unified sports does and can in the future help us to retain and regain youth players, both with and without intellectual disabilities. And I hope I've got us back-ish on time. Sergio, thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Fiona and Jennifer, of course, for this great presentation. And I like the idea of unified sports. That's really creating an inclusive sport environment. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and we are running out of time. So I think Gary will say to me, you have to stop now because the next presentation is already there. So I thank you very much. Great area to work in, and see you again. Bye. Gary?
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Jennifer, for joining us virtually. It was almost like Inception going on there. Excellent final presentation on what has been a fantastic and inspirational evening. Before I introduce Sergio to close the conference, you will see that I have just launched a poll to gather some of your initial thoughts around the event. And if you'd be so kind as to complete this short form before you leave today, that will be much appreciated from us here at iCoachKids. I now wish to reintroduce Sergio Lara-Bercial with some closing words to conclude today's proceedings. Sergio?
Thanks a million, Gary, and a very heartfelt thank you to all the speakers and all the coaches that showed up for day one of the iCoachKids conference. What an amazing few hours, really. 88 countries. We went back to our files. 88 countries, really people from all over the world. Today we started by announcing an incredible partnership with Nike to enhance the quality and reach of the iCoachKids movement and programs. We are still pinching ourselves, and we think we will pinch ourselves for quite some time. We then heard some terrific ideas to prevent dropout and maximize sport participation amongst young people from a tremendous lineup of practitioners and researchers. The challenge has been set. We all have a responsibility to make children fall in love with sport so they can reap the mental and physical benefits it has to offer. I am sure you will all play your part. Now, on to day two. A growing proportion of young people are joining so-called talent development environments every day across the world. Research shows that the talent development process is complex and loaded with double-edged situations that can lead to both positive and negative outcomes. Tomorrow, with the help of an incredible collection of practitioners and researchers, we will explore all the issues related to the talent development process with the main goal of maximizing the chances of positive outcomes for children and young people. Thanks a million for joining us today. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.